Lo and behold, we got an oar, folks. First depth chart of the season is out, and the quarterback position, no starters named. A lot of positions have oars. That's always going to be the case. But quarterback was the one that was especially notable this year, and it ended up being an oar. Nate Yarnell or Eli Holstein on the first official depth chart of the season, which was released yesterday. What did Pat Narduzzi say about it? What do we think about it? What else stood out on the depth chart? And what do we think about the betting line? Let's talk a little over-under. The actual over-under for the game, not just some made-up over-unders that we have. Let's talk about the two deep, the quarterback situation, and a lot more on the Tuesday edition of the Morning Pitt, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Yeah, it's Tuesday. It's the Morning Pitt, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I'm Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com. Glad you could check in this morning. There's plenty to talk about. It's funny every year, and sometimes every week, when we talk about the depth chart on a podcast, it's like it's just a piece of paper that has been proven many times in the past to not have any connection to the reality of what happens on the field, and yet we still spend a lot of time talking about it because they keep doing notable things on it. You know, like the quarterback situation is a big one, and it's a big topic. It's something we've talked about all through training camp. We talked about it all through the offseason, more and more as training camp went on, and the possibility existed that there could be some kind of maybe change from what we expected at that position. And then the depth chart comes out and more or less confirms that situation, confirms that there is an or there and that this competition really is happening. And it's real and it's spectacular, and it's going to play out not just in practice where we can't see it, but on the field during the games where we can. And just like in 2015 and maybe some other years where, I think a lot of people had opinions about the quarterback situation, we're going to get some firsthand evidence of how these guys play. And Pat Narduzzi said it yesterday that to some extent they want to let this play out on the field. They want to see who wins the starting job by how they play in games. Well, guess what? You and I get to see that. And so Narduzzi, by saying that yesterday, sort of removed himself from the whole, well, you don't get to see how the players are in practice. And we've towed that line many times ourselves. And I think there's truth to it too. Like so many times I've gone over this of like, look, it's really hard to go too strong in your criticisms of personnel decisions because we don't see how they practice. And coaches inevitably are going to go through a week of practice, and whoever's playing the best in practice are going to be the guys they put on the field in the game. It'd be very hard for a coach, and very few coaches would do this, to watch a guy stink in practice all week but say, yeah, but I know he turns it up during the game, so we're going to play him during the game. Most coaches are not doing that. Most coaches are basing their game day decisions on who shows up in practice and how guys do in practice. And so that provides a little bit of insulation for the coaches from the court of public opinion of why aren't you playing this guy? Well, he would be playing if he earned the job in practice. What we've got from Pat Narduzzi now, and the situation we're facing, and the situation Pitt is facing, and it's great for those of us on the outside, is Narduzzi has said they both practice really well. I want to see how they do in the games. We'll make the decision based on the games, which means we all get to see it play out in real time too. Now, if somebody ends up stinking out the joint and they end up and they become the starter, then we'll have valid concerns to raise and questions to ask. But we're going to see how this competition plays out, and I'm really looking forward to it. I predicted this on Sunday. I wrote I put out a projecting the two deep. Made kind of my best guess at what the two deep would look like. Some of them I got right. I think I got the entire offensive line, and the linebackers too. And I mean those were kind of easy. Oh, and I got the safeties, which I mean those three position groups were pretty easy. But I mean that's 10 out of 22 positions that I pretty much nailed. And I nailed the quarterbacks. Well, I didn't nail the quarterbacks because they listed Nate Yarnell or Eli Holstein and then listed Ty Diefenbach behind them. I thought it would just be Yarnell or Holstein. So I didn't entirely get that one down. But nevertheless, predicted the quarterbacks for the most part. Predicted this or because that's where things seem to be heading. That's what the talk was coming out of training camp. It's what the coaches seem to be leaning toward coming out of training camp. And it's going to play out. And I think it's going to be... if nothing else, it's going to be interesting to watch, because the thing about this, and I haven't even told you about this sweet shirt I'm wearing, but I'll tell you about that in a second. The thing about this quarterback competition, okay, And the thing about going into it like this, like the coaches have, by using this by saying we don't know who's going to start, by saying the starter for Saturday will be determined through the week, but both quarterbacks are going to play, and that's going to inform what decision we make as far as the long-term starting quarterback. The thing about that approach, as opposed to what they did last year, is they're leaving the door open for a quarterback to be replaced. They're leaving the door open for both guys to compete. Whereas you went into last year and it was Phil Dracovic. Phil Dracovic was the guy. He was going to be the starter. Everybody knew it. We knew it before any kind of official announcement was made. And he went out and he was the starter. We didn't really know what was behind him. We knew it wasn't good. We knew that what Dracovic was doing wasn't good, but we didn't know what was behind him. We didn't know if there was a better option. We're going to get to see it this time. This time we're going to get to see which quarterback runs the offense better, which quarterback moves the offense down the field, which quarterback makes the throws, which quarterback takes care of the ball, which quarterback is able to go out and make plays, which quarterback is able to extend plays, which quarterback is able to be dynamic. And that's going to be fun to watch. I'm excited. I'm looking forward to it for sure. I got a lot of thoughts on the quarterback situation. I just thought of like 3 other things I want to say about this. But you know what I always want to talk about? Homefield. Look at that Panther holding a football. You may or may not have seen this logo before. And if you have, there's a decent chance that you saw it either on Homefield's site, Homefield.apparel.com, or with me wearing it during one of these podcasts. Otherwise, I would have to look back through all of Pitt's history books to find this particular Rock Panther somewhere in Pitt's history books. But even though I might not be able to find it, maybe I never saw it before I got this t-shirt, it's still, there's no question what that logo is. That's Pitt. That's Pitt. It's instantly recognizable as Pitt. And this is the magic of what Homefield has done. They've made shirts and sweatshirts and hats and joggers and koozies and all these different things. And jackets, the bomber jackets, forget about it. But they've made these logos and these graphics and these marks that they're absolutely retro, but you don't necessarily know if you've seen it before. But it's instantly recognizable as being Pitt. It's like a modern retro. You know what I mean? It's like creating retro, and it's awesome. It doesn't look fake. That looks like that probably was a real logo at some point, and maybe it was. I'm not sure, but it's not one that I've seen very much of. But it's instantly recognizable as Pitt. It's clearly a Pitt shirt, and it's awesome. And then, like I always say, you take the great graphics and marks and logos and put them on the softest, best-fitting t-shirt I've ever had in my life, and the sweatshirts and all, everything is of really high quality at Homefield. So go to homefieldapparel.com to get your new Pitt gear, stuff you need for the season. And on your first purchase, you get 15% off if you use the promo code PIT24. So go to homefieldapparel.com, use the promo code PIT24, all one word. Use it on your first purchase, you get 15% off. That's a great deal. Some of the best stuff you're going to find, and at a discount. 15% off, promo code PIT24. Here's the thing about Nate Yarnell and Eli Holstein. And I made this point on the live show on Wednesday night. And I think it's important. And I think it's an important way to think about this. And I think it's an important reason to continue, that I continue to believe Eli Holstein could end up being the man here. And it's an important reason why, I feel like it's gotten disregarded, ignored, or just sort of shot down. Because over the past 2 weeks, maybe 3, I've been talking about how Eli Holstein legitimately can win this job, about how Eli Holstein could legitimately be the starting quarterback, despite the fact that Nate Yarnell came out of spring camp as the number 1 quarterback, despite the fact that they were so confident in Yarnell, they took him to Charlotte for the ACC Media Days. I've been saying for at least 2 weeks, if not 3, don't count out Eli Holstein here. This is a very real competition. It is very much unsettled. And here we are 2 or 3 weeks later with the first official depth chart out, and it's clearly very much unsettled about who's going to be the starting quarterback. And one of the biggest reasons the biggest reason I was saying stuff like that is because that's what I was hearing, was that Holstein was making a real battle out of it. But sort of cognitively, intellectually, if you want to think about it this way, and I would say intellectually in terms of thinking about it through some logic. Not that this is in any way an intellectual podcast or intelligent whatsoever. But if you want to think about it like sort of intellectually, think about it this way, okay? They came out of spring, and they came out of spring with Nate Yarnell as number one. They took him to Charlotte for the ACC Media Days. He's clearly the starting quarterback. He's the number one quarterback in camp. Fast forward to the end of camp, and even earlier than that, second week, third week of camp, and the tone has changed. The tenor has changed. No longer is Nate Yarnell the clear and obvious number one starter at quarterback, but it's a competition. It's Eli Holstein could win the job. It's those guys are going back and forth. Some days Nate's better, some days Eli's better, and we get all the way up to now, the first official depth chart of the season, and it's listed as an or. And Pat Narduzzi's talking about we're going to see both quarterbacks. All right. Now, number one, that obviously opens the door for either guy to win the job. But you have to also, I think you have to consider the context of everything going back to the spring. And even before that, where I use this analogy or this metaphor on the live stream of race cars, that one race car is ahead of the other. Very clearly, right? Nate Yarnell, number one guy. Eli Holstein, he's down here. For whatever reason. He was hurt a little bit during spring, whatever it may be. But there's that separation, right? One race car is ahead of the other. We're at the point now where the two race cars are even. That doesn't necessarily mean that first race car moved backward. And maybe it does a little bit. But more so, if you're going to say which quarterback is coming into the season with momentum, moving in the right direction, ascending, it's Eli Holstein. That car has caught up. And so even if Yarnell continues to progress and get better, Holstein's doing it at a quicker pace. He's drawn himself even after starting out behind. And so that, because he's heading in that direction, because he has pulled even and he's making a real battle out of this, a real race out of this, that's what gives me further confidence that he's ultimately going to be the guy. And you add in the fact that they did this with the or, and both guys will play and everything. If it was just Nate Yarnell, if it was clearly Nate Yarnell, they would have named him the starter. Because he was the starter coming out of camp, and he was the media day guy, and all this stuff. But they didn't do that. Because it's not clearly Nate Yarnell. I'm not saying it's clearly Eli Holstein, but this thing is very much up in the air. And I almost, based on how Pat Narduzzi talked yesterday, I almost think this might be settled by week 2. It's more so than even like waiting until after the Cincinnati game. There's part of me that thinks they'll have this game on Saturday against Kent State, and at the Monday press conference, we'll get a depth chart that lists one quarterback ahead of the other. You know what? I think they'll know. I think they'll have it in mind. I think they might even tell the team. They'll have one guy take all the first team reps and all that stuff, but they'll keep the or on there just to partially screw with us, but mostly to screw with Cincinnati. So that Cincinnati feels like they have to prepare for both quarterbacks. So I actually think they'll keep the or on there. I don't think Narduzzi will name a starter prior to that game, but when, let's say, Eli Holstein goes out and plays the entire game at Cincinnati, he'll see no reason for subterfuge in the West Virginia game, and he'll just name that player the starter as opposed to keeping the ors. But I could see him keeping the ors for the Cincinnati game, even though he's got it down, knows who he wants to go with heading into that game. So that's the biggest storyline, and that was a big one. What we expected, but now we get to see him play. And I'm looking forward to seeing both guys play in that game on Saturday. This should not be a game that's particularly close. I think the line I was just looking at scores and odds yesterday, and had Pitt minus 24.5 with an over-under of 55.5. I don't know if Pitt will cover the 24.5. I could see them winning by 3 touchdowns, but it might only be 3 touchdowns. It might only be 21 or 22 points, or it could be like 18 points. I could see them winning comfortably, but not necessarily covering 24.5. I could also see them winning comfortably and not hitting the over on 55.5. I think it opened at 54.5, or maybe it opened at 55, whatever it may be. It doesn't matter. You're looking in that range. 54, 55 points. I don't see that covering. I don't think Kent State will score enough to get it to that level, and I don't think Pitt's going to score like 60 in this game. So, you know, I guess if Kent State scored 2 touchdowns, Pitt would need what? 7 touchdowns? Or no, less than that. What is 55 minus 14? 41? 6 touchdowns? I don't know if I see that happening. Not sure. I don't think so. So I would take the under on the 55.5. Probably Kent State to cover 24.5, but I don't know. That one could get close. I just don't know if I see Pitt getting that. Anyway, so this game, or the 2 deep released yesterday. I mean, no real surprises on offense. Rodney Hammond or Desmond Reed at running back, kind of what I expected. I didn't put that in my predictions. The receiver depth chart, kind of weird. Kenny Johnson or Dejon Reynolds, Raphael Williams, and Kanate Mumfield as the starters. Reynolds also listed as a backup behind Mumfield. I mean, they're going to mix and match those guys. I think the top 3 will be Mumfield, Johnson, and probably Williams, possibly Reynolds, even though they're not listed at the same spots. But that'll be a mix and match all the way. Offensive line is what we thought. Branson Taylor, Ryan Jacoby, Lyndon Cooper, BJ Williams, and Ryan Baer. Defense, you get 5 defensive tackles listed as starters here. Nikai Johnson or Francis Brew or Anthony Johnson or Nick James or Isaiah Neal. 2 transfers, a true freshman and a redshirt freshman, plus Nikai Johnson, who moved to defensive tackle from defensive end this offseason. It's an interesting group. We'll see how that works out. But again, I think it's all like you look along the defensive line, it's all the same cast of characters we've been talking about all summer and all training camp. It's Nate Matlack and Sincere Edwards and Jimmy Scott and Chief Borders at defensive end. It's Nikai Johnson and Francis Brew and Anthony Johnson and Nick James and Isaiah Neal at defensive tackle. Sean Fitzsimmons is a little banged up, so he's not in that mix. But it's basically 1, 2, 3, 4, the 8 or 9 guys we've been talking about pretty consistently. And they'll be the guys who are in the mix and who will play. Linebacker is exactly what we thought it would be. Kyle Lewis and Brandon George starting at star and middle linebacker, respectively. Braylon Lovelace or Rasheem Biles at the money linebacker spot. That was our projection, and that ended up being accurate. Rylan Gandy is a starter. Rashad Battle gets a nod as a starting cornerback. Good for him. Tamon Lynham will be in the rotation as well with those guys. Free safety, the field safety, they got Javon McIntyre or P.J. O'Brien. We talked a lot about O'Brien last week, I think, of how he really made a competition out of that starting field safety job. That Javon McIntyre is a returning starter, one of the top players on defense, or one of the top snap getters, one of the top tacklers last year on defense, but that P.J. O'Brien had made a real battle out of it in training camp, and that's carrying over to the season, as he's an starter with McIntyre, and I think that will be a practice decision. Like whoever has the better practice, the cleaner practice, will start. But both of those guys will play, and ditto for Donovan McMillan and Cruz Brookins. There's no in the starters there, but I think they'll get. But obviously McMillan's going to play a lot, but Brookins is going to be in that rotation as well, and he'll get a lot of defensive snaps. It'll be interesting to see. And I wrote about this yesterday. Started kind of a new feature on Panther-Lair.com, five questions for the week, and I thought we'd do this every Monday. We'd do one question about the offense, one about the defense, one question about Pitt's opponent that week, one question about the ACC, and one question about recruiting. Question, comment, whatever it may be. And so, question about recruiting was, will Pitt's quarterback commit, Mason Heinschel, will he get 50 touchdowns this year? Because he had 4 passing touchdowns in his win on Friday night in the season opener. He also rushed for 120 yards. He didn't score any rushing touchdowns, but I think he's going to put up a ton of touchdowns, passing and running. And that'll be, so it's something like that. Can he get 50 touchdowns? Can Florida State bounce back? Because Florida State, actually, after their Georgia Tech game, now they get Boston College on Labor Day night. The game's at home, but another sort of weird, unconventional game time and, game situation, playing on a Monday night, which is weird, playing against another dynamic quarterback in Thomas Castellanos after playing Haynes King last week. I'm not saying Florida State's going to lose, but it's not like they're going from Georgia Tech to playing, Wofford or there's whoever they're playing this year, Central Connecticut State or something like that. They're playing FCC, or they're playing their FCS game next to last game of the season. So it's not like they're playing an FCS team. They should beat Boston College at home. But boy, howdy, would it get interesting if that game gets close going down to the wire there. I might have to check and see what the line is on that one. Anyway, we had question about offense, question about defense, question about Pitt's opponent, the ACC, recruiting. The question about defense was how many guys will they play this Saturday? Because last year in the Wofford game, they had 30 different players take at least one defensive snap. That's a lot. Right? That's a lot of defensive guys. I don't know if they'll get to 30 this year, but I think they'll put a lot of guys out there because they have a lot of guys who can play and a lot of guys who are capable of playing. I think a lot of guys they want to get a look at. And in a way, I mean, Kent State might just be bad enough that you can sort of have two FCS games between Kent State and Youngstown State. So I think they'll have a lot of opportunities to see guys, to get a look at them. And I think that'll include a lot of freshmen, a lot of redshirt freshmen, guys like Francis Brew and Jasir Whittington and Sincere Edwards, and then some, maybe Cam Lindsay gets some snaps on defense, and then some of these redshirt freshmen like Cruz Brookins and Jesse Anderson. I mean, there's going to be a lot of guys who play in this game on Saturday. I'm looking forward to it. It should be a game Pitt can win comfortably, and it should be one they can win comfortably enough that they can really kind of empty the bench a little bit and give a look to a lot of different guys. But, of course, we'll all just be watching the quarterbacks, right? We'll all be watching the quarterbacks. Listen, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, to get all of our Pitt video content. We had the Pat Narduzzi press conference yesterday with these daily Morning Pitt videos. We'll have videos, interviews with players and coaches throughout the week. Pat Narduzzi's sit down on Thursday afternoon is always a can't miss affair, so make sure you tune in for that. Get that video when we put it up there on Thursday afternoon. We always enjoy doing those. Of course, we have the Morning Pit. We have our live streams every Wednesday night, and we have our post-game shows. It'll be back this Saturday night after the Kent State game. I'm guessing we'll go live around 8 or so, maybe earlier. It depends on what time I get out of the stadium. Always enjoy those. We'll get the whiskey, and we'll have some fun. So you want to make sure you don't miss any of that stuff. Like this video and subscribe. youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Turn on your notifications so you get an alert sent to your phone anytime we post new content or go live. Season's coming, buddy. Today's Tuesday, so there's, 4 more days till game day? Looking forward to it. All right, thanks so much for tuning in today. Appreciate it. Hope your week get off to a great start. Hope you have a great Tuesday, and we'll catch up with you tomorrow for the Morning Pit right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.